8 ways Clinton Incorporated created the monster that is Trump's America. Hey, it's Prince of Queens, and there's so many things going on culturally at the moment that I decided I needed to explain how I think we really got here. My social media is pure chaos and lunacy. I am witnessing my rational friends get into ridiculous arguments daily and seeing previous friends and acquaintances get caught up in the collective hysteria that is the left's reaction to Trump's presidency. And I have had to let several people go. And so, I want to make it abundantly clear that I don't think Trump himself is the main cause of this cultural climate, but rather, I think it's Clinton Incorporated. And when I refer to Clinton Incorporated, I am referring to both Bill and Hillary Clinton, the Clinton Foundation, and their known and unknown donors all around the world, and people like George Soros and the several CEOs of the corporations who have donated to Clinton's campaign or given money to the Clinton Foundation over the years. I personally believe it is delusional to see all of these things as anything besides basically one gigantic corporate entity itself. And while I don't know who the top boss is and if it was Hillary Clinton herself, of course, I like to call it Clinton Inc. for short, because Hillary Clinton was the obvious face of it. That all said, the first way Clinton Inc. led us into this dystopian American reality that we are in today is their hubris and egomania. I think you need to keep in mind what type of presidential candidate we were dealing with, as was evident from what we absolutely know for sure about this woman and what we knew about her coming into this election. This was a woman who became the first lady about 25 years ago and never left politics after, only to run for president 8 years ago in 2008. When she was well past 60 years old, which isn't exactly young, and she lost at the time to a young black upstart named Barack Obama that nobody had ever really heard of at the time. It should have been a crushing defeat, but for whatever reason, this woman and her backers were so convinced that she was going to be president someday, the first female president someday, that she ended up trying to run again 8 years later when she was almost 70 years old and was literally fainting during her campaign. So, for everybody who thinks that Trump is just a power-hungry demagogue psycho, well, think about who he was up against and question whether or not a lot of that rhetoric was just psychological projection from his insanely egotistical opponent, Hillary Clinton, the first woman to spend close to $1.5 billion to not be elected president. The second step in the ways that Clinton Incorporated created our current cultural climate is the mainstream corporate media buyout, which has been going on since the 90s, and the eventual purging of anybody who did not relentlessly toe not just the Democratic Party line, but a purge of anybody in media who didn't follow the whims of Clinton Inc. And even from the friend circles of people who worked in media. If you were even friends with these people, on social media especially, and you spoke against Clinton Inc., you were supposed to be gone. You see, I know this very well from my personal experiences knowing dozens of people who work in media as either writers or editors at various publications. Very few of these people were particularly talented writers, and they are abysmally lazy in terms of actual journalism, but they are good at one thing. They virtue signal in just the right way. Their careers seem to be based around a constant game of showing the world how non-bigoted they are, or whatever they want to show the world in the exact right way that Clinton Incorporated wanted them to. More so, And this is where you know it was an actual conspiracy and not just a wacky conspiracy theory. You can find several examples of people being fired from their jobs for questioning the narrative that Hillary Clinton is going to be the next president, like in the case of Dr. Drew being fired from his successful radio show for questioning Hillary's health, or that guy who was fired from Vice magazine that I forget the name of. I know that Clinton Incorporated was running a really tight ship because I personally was unfriended or blocked on social media by at least a dozen friends that work in media the second I ever brought up things questioning feminism, for example, or basically anything that could be seen as anti-Clinton, which I did a lot because I was a Sanders supporter. It kept happening over and over to me alone. So while I have never seen an actual copy of the memo sent down from Clinton Incorporated to every single worker they employed through all of media, I can assume that it told each media worker to basically have a zero tolerance policy on any friend of theirs who challenged the narrative they were using to get Clinton elected, especially on social media. They needed to be gone. I lost several friends as a result of people attacking me for my support of Bernie Sanders. The strategy seemed to keep as many people as they could trapped in echo chambers, expelling the bad apples like myself. But it didn't work. Regardless, I got a bit ahead of the plot. Let me back up a bit. The third step Clinton Incorporated took to create this cultural climate was that after the media purification was going on steadily since the 90s, Clinton Incorporated began getting media to normalize and even celebrate protest activism as a morale builder instead of something that was oppositional to the governing body, which was the DNC, which was likely controlled by Clinton Incorporated anyway, even during the Obama administration. And they did this first by using mainstream media to create Black Lives Matter as a movement to take the cultural place of the Occupy movement. You see, the Occupy Wall Street protests were a legitimate threat to the establishment if somehow the masses had actually figured out what exactly they were protesting in terms of corporations and big bank corruption with government. Furthermore, Occupy was the first time social media was used to organize a protest that ended up being exponential in scale, and that freaked the establishment the fuck out. So regardless of how the elites ended Occupy or whether it pittered out on its own, it was probably a combination of both, they realized that there was a lot of protest energy that they needed to redirect, or it could pose a serious threat to the DNC and Clinton Incorporated. Black Lives Matter was the perfect way to distract attention from the more unified masses of Occupy, because basically every young white person in America has been raised to feel guilty about slavery, and almost every young Black American has been trained by their parents to fear the police because if they aren't careful, they might get themselves hurt or in trouble. I also suspect exit poll data from Obama's re-election had a bit to do with Clinton Incorporated ordering the media to create Black Lives Matter, because we can assume many people said that one of the reasons they voted for Obama a second time, despite him bailing out the big banks, was that he was Black. Regardless, protests became completely mainstream, fashionable, and basically unopposed by the time Black Lives Matter was in full swing. This did not happen organically. It was calculated. As I explain in my video, Don't Get Woke, Wake Up. The fourth step Clinton Incorporated took in creating the monster of a cultural landscape we live in today was steering the nature of this protest activism to be more geared towards electing Hillary Clinton in 2016. You see, Black Lives Matter was never so much a movement to help Black people, but rather a movement designed to make it look like queer Black women, or should I say fourth wave intersectional feminists, were helping Black people. Fourth wave intersectional feminists will gladly take credit for Black Lives Matter, and fourth wave feminism was already well underway on the internet by the time Black Lives Matter even happened. So all Clinton Incorporated had to do was begin converging all of these things together in more obvious ways, which certainly happened by 2015. Fourth wave intersectional feminism, which is the current feminist movement that is so tied to cultural Marxism and saying that all oppressions are connected became the main cultural narrative of the left. And as long as the word feminism was attached, Hillary Clinton could claim association with this new civil rights movement. If you were a part of Clinton Incorporated's media-created cool crowd, you were masquerading around with your friends as people who were fighting the system. Unopposed by anybody, of course, including police, which were basically totally fine with letting you stop traffic. And you were doing your best to make it look like you were of a marginalized group. So if you weren't a black trans woman, you better be black or gay or non-binary or at least a woman. And remember, kids, you all had to be feminists if you wanted to hang out with the protest-style activists of the Black Lives Matter protest era. And for the record, I really wonder what would happen if every activist group and professional activist was thoroughly investigated in terms of their funding, because it would be interesting to see where the paper trail leads to all the way up. It would also be interesting to know how the feminist blogs paid their bills, in particular Everyday Feminism, because I think Clinton Incorporated spent a lot of money making all of this happen, more so than people realize. The fifth step Clinton Incorporated took to create this cultural monster we live with today in Trump's America is the invention of the term Islamophobia. You see, prior to 2012 or so, you never heard the term Islamophobia, because it's kind of a silly concept to be scared of an actual set of beliefs and followers of those beliefs, which could be objectively rather scary to a lot of people for a lot of reasons. That said, Clinton Incorporated and the Obama administration's identity politics had already been successful in dividing the Occupy movement by shifting the focus onto black people by way of Black Lives Matter. And so they also needed to ensure that nobody had a problem with Clinton Incorporated's oil ties to the Mideast with Islamic governments like Saudi Arabia. At this point, I imagine they figured that they would make it taboo to criticize Islam by inventing the term Islamophobia and comparing it to a form of racism, because they knew from the exit polls from the 2012 election that nobody wanted to be racist anymore, so they wouldn't want to be Islamophobic either. This part almost worked, but thanks to people like Sam Harris, Dave Rubin, and Bill Maher, people realized something weird was going on, and they called it the regressive left. Some might speculate that what we should be really calling the regressive left is Clinton Incorporated. A lot of people would say that Clinton Incorporated had the most to gain by attempting to make the regressive, illiberal, and downright oppressive values of Islam into something that was cherished by the supposedly progressive Democratic Party. Step number 6 that led to where we are today was when Clinton Incorporated used the combined intersectional feminist total of Black Lives Matter, feminism, and Islamophobia to attempt to divide and conquer her way through this election. She used intersectional feminism and the myriad of ways that it gets people to fight amongst themselves to her advantage. Or she attempted to. You see, I honestly think that Clinton Incorporated already knew for absolute certain that Hillary Clinton was a completely unelectable candidate. So instead of trying to pretend she was electable, they tried to basically say on a cultural level that you better vote for her or else. Anybody opposed to Hillary Clinton was called an evil bigot. Intersectional feminist theory was used as the justification for that because no matter what your objection to her possibly was, they could find a way to link that to the quote-unquote cis-het white male patriarchy. Of course, this was not actually an effective strategy, and it cost Hillary Clinton many voters early on because people don't like being insulted and guilted into voting a certain way, especially by people that they thought were their friends. So around the time that it came out that Clinton was hiring people to attack their own friends online and call them racist misogynists for not supporting Hillary Clinton, Shit was already hitting the fan culturally. But it got even worse, of course. The seventh way, Clinton Incorporated created this monster that we live in as a culture today, was with one of the stupidest speech ideas in history, which was Hillary Clinton's long speech attempting to attack basically the majority of the entire internet, which was everybody who was opposed to her, and she called them the alt-right. And she tried to say that they were deplorable Nazi white supremacists for posting Pepe memes. This was a fucked up move on so many levels because it simultaneously made the less internet savvy members of the population become suddenly extremely paranoid about everybody around them who might happen to post a Pepe the Frog meme, which was a character that had been around in memes for numerous years before the election started that had nothing to do with white supremacy like she said it did, but even more so, it encouraged people on the internet to take this alt-right Nazi concept and run with it even further. Probably most often just to get a rise out of people because it was clearly working. But even weirder, calling Pepe the Frog and the quote-unquote alt-right a bunch of white supremacists gave exposure to people like Richard Spencer and invented a legitimate but small subculture of white nationalists and even white supremacists who saw the explosion of fear around relating memes to a giant pool of Nazis as an invitation to join this supposed giant growing Nazi party, which, prior to her speech, basically probably didn't even really exist at all. Richard Spencer was not popular prior to this speech. So while the legitimate white nationalist type people are still probably a minuscule fraction of the Pepe the Frog posting population, they are now officially on the map thanks to Hillary Clinton's stupid fucking speech. Fuck you. The eighth and final step in all of this madness from Clinton Incorporated was blaming the entire circus on Russia, which I still can't say I have a great explanation for why they'd possibly do that. I really don't know if Clinton Incorporated actually believed for a moment that Russia was behind the social media resistance to Hillary Clinton's 2016 presidential bid like they say it was, or if it was just a damage control type of last gasp before the election, hoping to distract people with the fear or hope that a new Red Scare would keep people from voting for Trump. But that's besides my point. Ultimately, the plan that had likely been brewing from Clinton Incorporated think tanks probably since the 90s when Hillary Clinton was the First Lady, this plan to get her elected as president eventually ended up failing. But they had no way to deprogram the masses from the delusions they put them under as a collective. People still believe every piece of their programming, from the idea that their brothers and fathers are secret misogynists, down to calling people like myself Russian hackers on the internet. They have called me that. Yes, I'm not lying. You see, what people see as President Donald Trump's America is not really based so much around him, what he has said as an individual, nor even his campaign promises. Because really, Hillary Clinton was every bit as awful of a person and candidate as Trump is. And you can find plenty of quotes from her to compare to his quotes and policy decisions of hers in the past that were awful. Rather, people's perception of Trump is based around Clinton Incorporated's gigantic smear campaign of everybody opposed to Hillary Clinton, which ended up attempting to relentlessly paint Trump out to be literally Hitler, because, of course, they were assuming that it would guarantee that he'd lose the election if they just said he was literally Hitler enough times. They assumed down at Clinton Incorporated's corporate office that Hillary Clinton was guaranteed the victory, and that we wouldn't have to deal with the reality of America living under a leader that many of its citizens actually believe might be a genocidal maniac based on their very deliberate media bias that painted him out that way, even though he has never held a single political office. So it's kind of crazy to say all this stuff about him. And he hasn't even really said anything worse than Clinton has said anyway, if you take the super predator line of hers into account and some other stuff. So now we live in 2017 and Trump is in office, and the people who were hypnotized by this imagined reality Clinton Incorporated warned everybody about that wasn't supposed to even happen. These people are now convinced that the alternate reality is coming true, when all Trump is doing largely is sticking to his campaign promises. The people still under this collective hypnosis believe that Trump is going to throw all of the Muslims in the oven and that Islam didn't do nothing in terms of violent extremism. And if you mention Islamic extremism, you're still supposed to be an Islamophobe. And where's their proof of this horrible bigotry from Trump's few-week-old presidency? A few-month-long immigration ban from some countries that Obama selected anyway. And so, now we live in a fucked up reality that is the product of the mainstream media and all of the Clinton Incorporated funded activist groups having no plan B. They didn't know what would happen if Hillary Clinton didn't actually win the presidential election. And even if she had won, I personally think she would have had a tiger by the tail anyway. But now the metaphorical cultural tiger has completely gotten free. And it's all of the idiots claiming to want a civil war with Trump supporters that represent the tiger. All of this is why you haven't seen Hillary Clinton since the inauguration, because she knows she fucked up. And that's also why leftist media outlets are just acting like the sky is falling, the country is literally being taken over by Nazis, and that they must do everything possible to just resist, resist, resist. However, this motley crew that is the mainstream media is completely ineffective in doing anything besides fear-mongering, because their entire purpose was to fear-monger Hillary Clinton into office, and they are now lacking leadership. Because even if Hillary Clinton wasn't truly the top dog, that top dog obviously failed with their agenda and is probably considering whether or not they want to be top dog anymore. That's all. Drop me a comment and stay tuned.